Hey, connected yoga teachers. Before we get into today's episode, I wanted to take a moment to address the United States Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade on June 24th, which stripped away the right to have a safe and legal abortion. Restricting access to comprehensive reproductive care, including abortion, threatens the health and independence of all Americans. This decision could also lead to the loss of other rights. And no matter where you are, I'm over here in Canada, this is a very important issue for us to look at right now. So if you want to learn more about what you can do to help, go to podvoices.help. I encourage you to speak up, take care, and spread the word. And I also want to give a huge shout out of thank you to all of the podcasters who have chosen to share this message at the top of their podcast episodes. And also to Ariel Nissenblatt, host of the Feedback with Earbuds podcast, for organizing this movement and putting everything together. Handy scripts for podcasters. There's a playlist showing all of the podcasts who are speaking out right now. So if you have a podcast or if you listen to other podcasts, I'll make sure to include a link in our show notes to the resources that have been created for this movement to speak up. Today's episode has been brought to you by OfferingTree. And speaking of OfferingTree, I have an update to share with you about some new features that have just been added or that are coming soon. I'm going to share more about that news later on in today's episode. And if you're sitting here listening and thinking, I don't know what OfferingTree is, let me tell you, they are an amazing company that is listening to what yoga teachers need, and then they're creating the best, in my opinion, all-in-one software for wellness professionals. So if you are wanting a simple and professional website where you can schedule classes, take payments, book appointments, easily integrate with Zoom, time zones, all of the various currencies from around the world, make sure to check out OfferingTree, and you can find a discount over at offeringtree.com/Shannon. And today's episode is also brought to you by the Accessible Yoga Continuing Education Program. Many of you have heard of Jivana Heyman and have heard Jivana Heyman's voice on this podcast. Jivana is the founder of Accessible Yoga, and him and his team have created some really amazing continuing education programs. I wanted to tell you about them here today, especially because this month of July, if you're listening in real time, July 2022, it's all about pelvic health. And I'm really excited to be part of this. I'll put a link in our show notes. Make sure to check it out. So there's a few things that are coming up. Avery, who we've had on the podcast, Avery is teaching yoga for your pelvic floor on July 21st, 2022. They've been a guest here on the podcast, and I highly recommend signing up for their class. Then on July 25th, there's a panel discussion. Now, anyone can attend this. It's free to attend. So Larissa Parson, Kim Ong, Megan Peterson, and host Tristan Katz will be at that panel. I'm super excited. I can't wait to attend and listen in. And they're going to be talking all about yoga and pelvic health. So presenters are going to share their experience and their expertise. They're going to talk whole body approaches to pelvic health, the importance of shame-free spaces, exploring pelvic wellness, how yoga teachers can effectively cue pelvic floor activation in classes, pre- and postnatal considerations, and how we can support queer and trans communities in the realm of pelvic health, and much more beyond that. So make sure to sign up for that. I'll put a link in the show notes actually for you where you can sign up and register for that one or all of them. And keep an eye out for the Accessible Yoga continuing education that they offer. Thank you so much, Jivana and the entire Accessible Yoga team. I love the experts that you're gathering, as well as these amazing topics that are so relevant to what yoga teachers need to know right now. Oh yeah, and I know that you're a podcast listener because you're here. have you checked out the Accessible Yoga podcast? Add that to your playlist if you haven't. Jeevana and I have a chat on there that's coming out really soon, if it's not out already when this comes out. And we're talking all about pelvic health and yoga and how to offer a yoga class that is more accessible to anyone with a pelvis. You can find out more by going to accessibleyoga.org or go to our show notes for today, theconnectedyogateacher.com/281, and we will put direct links there for you to find the July programs, but also lots of other really great resources. Hello and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast. If you are new here, I'm your host, Shannon Crow, and I use she, her pronouns. And this podcast is being recorded on Anishinaabe, Odawa, and Mississauga land, which was called by the settlers who came here, the Bruce Peninsula in Ontario, Canada. If you've been here for a while and you've been listening to the podcast, you know that I've been learning more about how yoga was treated through colonization and also how the people who took care of this land that I'm on were treated through colonization as well. And I've been on this journey of learning. I'm so glad that you're here along with me. And I started to think, what if I share with you as I'm learning, when I find good resources, what if I share those here on the podcast? And so if you'd like to join me to learn, this week I'm listening to a really amazing podcast. It's one of those ones where the next episode isn't out yet and I can't wait, but it's a really fascinating listen as well. It's a really great story. So it's called Buffy, and it's about Buffy St. Marie. I'm not sure if you've heard of Buffy, her story, and the way she has used music to speak up as an Indigenous person is one that I hope everyone hears. So I knew of Buffy growing up because she was born in Canada. You know, my grandparents and my parents talked about Buffy St. Marie, and she was on Sesame Street. That was a big deal when I was growing up because she was a Canadian on Sesame Street. Buffy has been sharing music for 60 years, but I did not know all of the details of her life, and it's fascinating to learn her story. So go and listen for sure. Shout out to CBC and Phelan Johnson for this 5-part series. I cannot wait to hear your feedback when you have a listen to that. So you can search anywhere, just search Buffy, Buffy, on any podcast app, or we'll link to it in the show notes. And if you do go listen, or if you have an idea of something that you are reading or listening to that is teaching you more, especially about Indigenous people or yoga and decolonization, I would love to know what resources you have, and I'm open to suggestions of things to learn about next. Speaking of learning and growing throughout life, I'm also a mom of 3. Those 3 beings are literally my best teachers. I'm also a yoga teacher, a podcaster. That's why you're here having a listen, and founder of Pelvic Health Professionals. And this podcast was created with you in mind, the yoga teacher, because I know what it can be like to leave a yoga teacher training and just feel like, oh my gosh, where do I start next? You know, what training do I need next? How do I do my accounting? How do I run this small business? How do I get more people to sign up to my classes? And I wanted a place where you could feel connected to information, inspiration, and support as you do this day-to-day stuff as a yoga teacher building a business. And today's episode, I am really excited about because we're going to dig right into some teaching tips that will really help you. And one thing that I love about hosting this podcast is that I get to talk to people who offer yoga teachers really actionable tips and steps that you can implement right away. And this episode with Gabrielle Harris is so full of tips that all yoga teachers can look at and think, do I want to incorporate that into my yoga class? So it doesn't matter if you're fresh out of yoga teacher training, maybe you're in your first yoga teacher training right now, or if you've been teaching for years. I think that there is something in this episode that you can walk away with and think, I'm going to add that to my style of teaching or to my tool belt of things that I use as a yoga teacher. Also, you might already know Gabrielle or the 2 books that she has written. She's the author of The Language of Yin and The Inspired Yoga Teacher. And we have a really fun surprise for you at the end of today's episode. So I'll give a small hint. You could win a book. So make sure to listen to the end of the interview where Gabrielle starts talking about the book and this exciting news. Gabrielle describes herself as a writer at heart and a yogi in mind and body. And her aim is to inspire students and teachers from all disciplines to keep falling in love with yoga each new day. Gabrielle has over 1,000 hours of training in various disciplines and traditions, and through her written work and yoga classes, she reminds us to start living a full life through the toolbox of yoga. In our conversation today, you are going to hear more about Gabrielle's journey in writing her 2 books, how to teach yoga to beginners, why language is so important and powerful in yoga. And she also shares her thoughts on what makes a good yoga teacher and why our job is to watch, listen, and observe rather than centering ourselves in our teaching. Gabrielle offers some tips on the different types of cues we might use, how to practice nonviolent communication, and encouragement around reflecting on our responsibility as yoga teachers. I learned so much in this chat with Gabrielle, and I'm so excited that you get to listen in and take these tips, kind of sift them through, think about them, and think on which one, I would just choose one for now, which one really grabs your attention for implementing in your own yoga classes. And I can't wait to see what that is. I'm going to share what my key takeaway was as I listened back to this interview. And let's dive right in and meet Gabrielle. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, Gabrielle. It's great to have you here today.
Hey, Shannon. Thanks for talking to me. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. I'm really excited that we get to dive into the science of teaching and some tips and tools for yoga teachers. But before we do that, can you tell our listeners what is the work that you do and who do you do it for?
So primarily I'm a yoga teacher at the moment, and I actually work at a yoga studio teaching group classes. And also, of late, you may know I'm also an author, so I'm claiming that title as well. And the books that I write them with the intention of helping yoga teachers empower themselves and become better teachers out in the world.
I hear from a lot of yoga teachers who love your books. Tell us about the 2 books that you have written.
So yes, I've written 2 books, which is interesting because I only set out to write one. So I started with writing a yin book because I'd primarily done a lot of training in yin and was very interested in it. And when I finished, I realized I still had a lot of material and I wanted to take that into the yang world, which was what I started in. So I've ended up with the yin and the yang of my books, which I'm pretty pleased. And you might notice that one cover's black and one cover's white. I'm pretty proud because one book's quite a big effort, and two is not double the effort, but it is still a big effort. So it's taken me about 4 years of my life to complete these 2 books, and it's been a great process. I can talk more about that more if you like, but I just wanted to say that having a long-term project like that is really fulfilling, and that's how I see yoga teaching as well. It's long-term.
So when you say that teaching yoga and writing these books has been a long process, what sort of got you through that process?
Well, I loved it. I mean, it was something that I got up every day and I really wanted to do. So it didn't seem like a job to me. It seemed like something that I really wanted and needed to do. And I think that comes back to yoga teaching. If you find some type of yoga teaching or some, I guess, niche area that you really love, then it's a really good sign or signal that you should carry on with that, because that's what propels us each day to get up and to keep giving. So it wasn't really a job for me, Shannon. It was a pleasure. And as I mentioned before, having a long-term project, anyone to have a long-term project of any sort, I think is very empowering, very propelling until it's over.
Right.
So, yeah. Yeah.
And so, with your years of experience of teaching yoga, what are some of the things in terms of kind of that science of teaching that you have learned? Because also tell our listeners that before you were a yoga teacher, you were teaching something else. And before we hit record here, you were saying you think that comes into how you've learned to teach yoga as well.
Yes, I do. So I was a TESOL teacher, which is teaching English to speakers of other languages, for many, many years, and a teacher trainer in that field. And so what I did is I taught students from all around the world English, and then went on to being a teacher trainer, so teaching teachers to be English teachers. But so it's interesting because even though the medium was English and we're in the yoga world, there's not really too much difference, I don't think. I mean, people are learning and they're struggling with learning in some areas, either with their body or with English. They all want to learn and they want to progress along the path. So we had students come in who spoke no English at all. So you could probably compare them to a beginner student or someone who'd never ever in yoga, never really experienced or been in their body before. So this is really a true beginner. And one thing that was really important is we didn't teach in their native language. We taught by immersion. So we jumped straight into using English. And I think this is really important and I want to circle back to this if I can remember, about jumping into teaching yoga straight away. So we use the language of English as we do use the language of yoga. We jump straight in with that. But what was really powerful for me is learning how to make everything very essential. So we couldn't use a lot of fluff when we were speaking. We had to use graded language and essential language. And I think this is very important for language teachers to cut out a lot of the static and come back to what is essential. That's one really important thing that we could maybe start with, or I could carry on.
I think that's a great place to look at, because I can think of what it feels like to be a yoga teacher and want to just keep talking about yoga and all of the aspects of yoga. And meanwhile, people are just trying to, like, where do I put my foot? What, am I inhaling or exhaling here? Like, what is happening? So let's dig into that. Like, how do we cut out that fluff as yoga teachers?
Well, one of the techniques we did as a language teacher, and I think I could maybe relate it to yoga teaching, is we gave students a task, and that was to maybe, for example, talk about themselves for 3 minutes. So they would talk to a partner, talk about themselves for 3 minutes, and then we'd say, great, now let's do it for a minute. So they'd have to take that information and put it into a minute. And then we'd say, great, do it in 30 seconds. Great, and now, 10 seconds. So in the end, you've got the essential. They had to keep cutting out, drilling down, peering down to what is most important. And that last bit, that's the bit that you want to use when you're teaching.
I think that's probably also what you want to use as you're writing a book. Am I right?
Oh my goodness. So the book. So I threw out all that advice when I was writing the book. Well, not really. I wrote a lot very, very quickly, and that was the easy part. It is much more difficult to be precise and concise and essential. So the work came for me with the editing and the editors. It was getting rid of all this. I mean, I know a lot about lots of different little things, but but they're not important.
Yeah. Okay. So, as yoga teachers, can we practice that in a yoga teacher training? Let's say we want to lead someone through a movement practice. It's not like we're making them do something faster. It's not the same, or is it? How do we
Um,
take that, what you learned in teaching language, and apply that to a yoga teacher training?
so it depends what style you're teaching, I think, Shannon. I think if you're teaching vinyasa-based style, you really need to just keep it down to the essence, the core of vinyasa, which is vinyasa means to place carefully the body and the breath and the mind. So that's the essence of vinyasa. So your cueing would have to reflect that. And it's we know that with vinyasa that tempo is very important. So you would be inhale, step your right foot forward, and that would be pretty much it. Because you want to keep a tempo, and the essence is in that tempo. Different styles of yoga, though, there's more space. I mean, yin yoga. Have you ever done yin yoga, Shannon?
I have. I love
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
You love it. Oh, good. So yin yoga, I jokingly refer to it as watching paint dry because it's so slow. And um, the tendency for teachers there is there's 3, 4, 5 minutes. What's going on? What am I meant to be saying? So you then have to come back down to the essence of what it is you're trying to teach for yin. So just to go back, if you want to know what the essence is of what you're trying to teach, is you need to go back to what your intention is for that class. So if I was teaching a yin class and maybe my intention, my theme was ahimsa, kindness, being kind to your body, being kind to others, then what I would do personally is I would then make a word bank of some essential important words, a very, very short 2-3 sentence encapsulation of what the sutra meant. And when I was teaching, I would stick to that. So, I mean, there's a lot I can dive into with yin, but in summary, when you're teaching yoga, come back to what's most important. And it's really important to self-edit yourself. So when I wrote the book, I was editing myself. So you have to have the skill of being able to step outside yourself as a teacher and listen to what you're actually saying. I mean, what are you actually saying? And what is the purpose for why you're saying it?
This is so good. I'm thinking of when you started to talk about yin and you were saying, we have more space there to talk.
Mm.
Can you clarify for us what I hear you saying? I think I hear you saying is we're not trying to fill all the space with words. Instead, we're being really intentional with those words. We're looking at that word bank and
Mm.
we're still cutting the fluff. Is that right? Because I have felt myself as a teacher and I have been in classes where people just want to fill the space with words.
Yeah, well, okay. So I really want to talk about why that is. But going back to your question, I like to think of it as essential oil, or perfume. You only need one drop for it to be potent, a good perfume. If it's rubbish perfume, you're probably spraying it all over yourself. But think of it like that. So it's essential language is powerful. If you use your language well and you drop it at exactly the right moment, it's going to reverberate out into the whole pose or class. And it's going to land because what happens, I think, is people when they're teaching yoga, um, they want to fill the space. And So what happens is everything starts to run into each other. So you'll get a movement, direction, instruction, alignment cue, and maybe some philosophy, and it's all running into one another. And what I've noticed with my own teaching is, and it's a little tricky to do, but you just drop in one little thing and you watch and you wait and you see how it lands with the students. This is really important.
I love this, the whole idea of waiting and seeing how it lands with people.
Mm.
How do we practice this? How do we
As
learn how to
teachers,
do this? Yeah.
how do we practice self-editing?
Yeah, like cutting out the fluff, self-editing, and then also practicing that waiting for a moment, like dropping that, or how do we refine this?
Okay, well, it's first of all, it's very, very awkward for a lot of people to be silent. I know it's just it feels more comfortable to talk, to fill the space. So we have to become better listeners, don't you think? We have to when we're there to give instructions and movements, but we're also there to listen and to watch and to observe and to, so maybe it's more about taking that role of the listener rather than the speaker. Listen. Listen to understand. I think you know this one, Shannon.
I do. I have it on my, it sits above my computer because I have to
Mm,
practice this. Communicate and listen to understand, not to be understood. I don't
it's
know who,
beautiful. It's beautiful.
I don't know who said it. It was in a workshop, and I should carry it around with me when I go and meet with family.
You should get it on a t-shirt
Yes.
and print one for all of your family.
So that I can see it when I'm talking to them.
Yes.
Oh,
Oh, we should all wear them. But it's tricky, isn't it? So why the question I have for you and myself, maybe now that we're contemplating this, is why do we want to fill that space? What is it?
it's a really good question.
Yeah. Well, I think in the beginning could be nervousness.
Mhm.
But we need, I think it takes a bit of bravery to be silent, because maybe this might be a generalization, but I think the people that know the most probably say the least. I mean, look at the Tao. They're short little sentences, but they're filled with meaning that you can study for the rest of your life.
Right. I appreciate that example because I know of some teachers who teach other things, and students have said they just like to use a lot of big words and a lot of words.
Yeah, well, it's not, depends what type of class you're teaching and who you're teaching, of course, but keep things simple. I have to keep repeating this to myself because I have a tendency to over exaggerate everything. I'm writing a course at the moment and I keep saying it, just keep it simple. Keep it simple. Don't overshare too much. Don't introduce unrelated nuggets of information that is not necessary at all. And also really important to, if you teach theming, try not to introduce really complex themes while people are struggling in a pose. Like, I tell a funny story. I had some students in, bound half moon pose, and I was trying to tell them a story about Ganesha and some cakes, and they were struggling and falling over, but I'm determined to get through the story about how Ganesha ate all these cakes, and it was too much. If this pose is difficult, that's enough for that moment.
I love this story. I love this example so much of trying to add that in. I'm also thinking of sometimes I'm in a yoga class or taking one online and the teacher is talking about something totally unrelated, like,
Yeah.
they went on a trip to somewhere and they're talking about their trip or and and we do like to get to know our teachers, but I feel like in that moment that's maybe not the
Mm.
place.
Well, the thing with sharing from your life, I think uh, sharing from your life can be very powerful, but only under a couple of circumstances. And one is if you share from your life something that's happened, something major that's happened, and you want to bring it into your teaching, you have to have digested that fully and it has to be embodied and you have to work through all of that before you introduce it. Otherwise, you're going to attach emotion to it. Students aren't necessarily interested in your experience. What they're interested in, and this comes back to what you were saying about the weather or whatever, what they're interested in is how whatever you've been through and worked through and come to a solution about applies to them. So you can talk about the weather if you can tie it back to what someone's struggling with in their situation in life right now. But otherwise, it's just it's not needed maybe.
I think this is a really good time for that self-reflection, that self-study, noticing when we do try and fill that gap with talking with someone. Maybe it's even, we get into an elevator with someone and do we choose to sit there in silence or, maybe we see our neighbor, are we okay with being silent or do we need to fill the space with talking? It's really interesting to think of what is acceptable and appropriate in society. One of my children is very quiet
Mm.
and he gets teased for it. And I think, you know what? He just sits here and listens to what's happening. And then when you least expect it, he's the one to speak up and say something that's really witty or funny.
Mm. So yeah, this is still waters run deep.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Shannon. Sorry to interrupt, but sorry to talk over the top of you and continue to talk nonstop. But yeah, how do we practice that? So we practice it in conversations. Become the listener. Why not? Become the listener. Stop. Just put down your agenda for a couple of minutes and become the listener. How do we do that in yoga classes? You might have to get someone in to just observe you and give you some feedback about your talking, or record your classes and listen back to them and try to work out the amount of talking compared to the amount of space. That would be my tips for trying to work with bringing more space into your class.
I think that's a great idea to record it and listen back. I used to do that as a new teacher because I was nervous and I wanted to see if I could actually do those poses in that time, and it taught me a lot. So
It's a good technique, definitely.
What are some of the other things that you think yoga teachers in their teaching?
I was going to say what in their lives. So, do you mean in terms of technique, teaching technique?
Sure. Anything that we maybe haven't thought of that we could try out that will improve our teaching.
Well, technically, I mirror. I That's something that's can be quite challenging for a lot of teachers, but I think it's really helped my teaching is to mirror the students. So that's one thing that I've been working with. Is that something that you do yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been in person with people for a long time,
Oh,
and I feel like Zoom does something. But
maybe it's
yes,
difficult on Zoom. I don't know how that would work
I
on
feel
Zoom.
like Zoom flips you around so that you already are mirrored.
I see. Okay. Oh, that's convenient. That's
Yeah.
great.
So tell us what helped you to build that, because I remember thinking, okay, right hand, left hand.
Yes. Well, it's funny now because when I'm doing a class, someone says, step your right leg forward. I step my left leg forward. My right and left side. So before I was a yoga teacher, I was a group fitness instructor. And I learned a couple of really good skills from that. And one was mirroring. And what helped me is I got on the front of my mat, the top of my mat, I put an L on the right side and an R on the left side. So that made it really easy for me to say, if I said step my right foot forward, to step my left foot forward, because it's on the mat. Or you can put it on your hands, just in the little bit where your thumb and first finger meet. So that's a really good way to practice mirroring.
That's a great idea.
But then just know that for the rest of your life, you will not know what your right and left side are. You'll be the disobedient student in the class, moving all your wrong limbs. The other thing that I learned from group fitness, which was really good, was timing and pace. So we had to learn a script, and the script went to the beat of the music every 4 beats. And exactly when the song finished, we had to finish. There was no, you couldn't go beyond the song, you couldn't start before it, and you had to keep this 4-beat rhythm. So timing is really important. Okay, this is a generalization. Yoga teachers, I think, can lose track of time because it can be a little bit, ethereal, and we can be, in the moment, being present, and we may lose track of time, but it's really, really important to know that if you've got 5, if you're doing a vinyasa, it's 5 breaths, not 6, not 4, and 5 on the other side, and you keep that rhythm and that beat and the tempo. And if you're in a yin class, set your timer for both sides, maybe equally if you want, but keep the start on time, finish on time. Have a little bit of leeway for movement. I think it's important because you just don't know what's going to crop up. But I think timing is important. And I think just on timing, someone's come to our class and maybe it's an hour class or 45 minutes. We need to really respect their time as well. So that's an important reason to be sharp with your timing.
I think this is such an important thing. And yes, it was a generalization, but it is one that I have seen over and over again. Going to a yoga class, I love when things start and end on time personally. And
yeah, because we don't know what time it is. We're in la la land. And, if you're put into Shavasana and you just have no idea what the time is, and then you start to panic because your car parking is running out and you're in Shavasana for another 15 minutes over time. Yeah, you're biting into other people's lives.
Yes, thank you for saying that, because I think sometimes teachers think, well, if I go 5 or 10 minutes over, I'm giving more. Well, no, not if someone has a dentist appointment and they're relying on you. Students even would tell me, hey, I have to leave 10 minutes early. And I was like, I will watch the clock for you. Like, I really, I don't mind doing that. I like it.
Yep, that's great if they tell you. Isn't it better if they tell you rather than just roll up their mats and walk out? It's much better that you know that they've got to go somewhere rather than they don't like you.
Yes, exactly. I'm popping in here, Connected Yoga Teachers, because I wanted to share a bit of news with you about some OfferingTree updates. So if you've not heard of OfferingTree yet, this is a company that listens to what yoga teachers need, and then they put that into their all-in-one software. I personally use and love OfferingTree, and that's why I'm so excited about these updates. First of all, reporting features. So you all know that I talk about looking at your numbers as a small business owner. Not just your financial numbers, but all the numbers that you can gather, all of the data. And OfferingTree is about to release reporting features that are going to allow you to look at the data based on a specific offering, maybe a teacher, if you have various teachers at your studio or at your space or an online studio, and also the day and time of week. So we can really gather this information and then make choices in our business when we can look at those. Also, like I said, OfferingTree is listening to yoga teachers. So if ever you think, well, I need this report and this would help me, and if they don't have it, reach out and tell them or ask them, is this a report that you can put together? I say this all the time. OfferingTree is listening. They are making, adjustments. They are adding features when yoga teachers ask for them and need them. So make sure to reach out to them. Also, they're adding features that relate to permission levels. So let's say you have an online studio or an in-person studio, and you maybe have an office admin person and different teachers, and those people all want to access your OfferingTree account. You can set the permission levels so that they have more access or less access to different features. And finally, another one, more refund options have been added. So you can choose how and when you refund students when that applies based on your refund policy. And I love that these new features have been added. So thank you so much to OfferingTree for bringing the podcast to all of our listeners today. If you are using OfferingTree and you're a podcast listener, tag them, tell the world on social media how much you love OfferingTree, and tell the world also that you heard about them on the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. If you're wanting to check out OfferingTree and see all of these features and you're looking for something that will make your life simpler, make sure to go over to offeringtree.com/Shannon for a discount. Let's get back into our chat with Gabrielle. I don't know that I ever thought about the timing of the flow. So how do you do that? I mean, it sounds like you learned to do that in the fitness world.
I did, yeah. And I'm really good at it because of that. Go to a group fitness class and see how they do it.
Right. Is it like counting? Are they counting in their head?
Well, when we got our scripts, they were all, everything that we had to say was measured in these beats and time. They gave you the times, and you knew what because it was all to music. So you knew at the chorus that you'd be up to a certain part of the routine.
Oh, wow. That's really amazing. And then what is your favorite timer when you're doing yin yoga? Because I also like to know that both sides of my body are going to get equal time.
Yeah. Yeah. I started off with, which I really quite liked, with the egg timers, with the sand. They just seem so yin-like, the sand dripping through them. And you can buy on wherever sand timers, the little egg ones. They look like an hourglass with the sand dripping through. You can buy ones that are 5 minute, 3 minute, and 1 minute ones. All in one.
Oh, wow.
It's so cool.
Oh.
Yeah. I like them.
That's really cool.
And the students like them too.
Well, I like it because it's not something that's beeping.
It's not beeping, and it's not interrupting. And I've been using my phone lately, but what I find is when it's just looking at my phone just distracts me really. It doesn't keep me connected to what I'm doing. So, I'd recommend one of those.
Speaking of which, my phone has just gone off. I was just thinking how annoying it can be when a phone is near you.
Do you want to get that?
Oh my God. No, it's not. It's just a timer to pick my daughter up, but I need to shut it off because Sean is getting her when I have an interview.
Oh, okay.
It was such good timing for us to have a discussion around phones in a yoga class. Okay, so we can look for those sand timers. Mm-hmm. So we're going to mirror, we're looking at the timing, starting and ending on time, and the time on both sides of the body or the rhythm of that class. What other technical teaching things do you have to share?
Well, there's different types of cues. You can have an alignment cue or a movement cue, just to get someone from A to B. So you have to get someone into the position, and then you use your alignment cue, and then you use I don't know about everyone else, but maybe a more philosophy or mindfulness cue. So that's how I like to cue. the thing is, I think there's an order to it. So always start with the body, get the person into the position. Something simple to maybe make them feel the pose more or to express it more in their body. And then your little bit of philosophy or mindfulness or breath or energetic cue. I think they're separate types of cues, and I think we need to think about how we order them, not to mix them all up too much, and maybe not use all of them as well. But this is something that we need to understand, is that there's different types of cueing and there's a place for all of them.
So, can you go through what you think the different types of cues are and that order?
So again, it depends what type of class you're teaching, but let's maybe try a yin class. First of all, you need to get the student into the approximate shape of the posture for the target area. So maybe you're targeting the outer glutes and you want to get them into something that looks like swan pose. So you would have to cue something like bring your right knee behind your right wrist and maybe bend up your back leg if that feels more comfortable. Move your shin forward or back, move your knee in or out. However you teach to get students into that posture. That's the first one. You need to get them into the shape. Once they're in the shape and it's really clear, there needs to be a little bit of space so they can feel that shape in their body, because this comes back to the giving space. If you start to then layer on more and more cues, they might still be in that first cue. They might still be trying to struggle with finding their body in time and space. So a little bit of space is needed. I think once it seems that they're in the shape or approximate shape of what you are going for, then you could probably work at more expression of the pose. So expression is, how do I help the student make this pose feel really good in their body or outwardly expressive, or I guess the word could be bloom or grow or expand, or how do I help the student expand into this pose? So what type of cue you could use for that is more of, I guess, more of an interoceptive cue. Do you know what interoceptive is? Yeah.
But tell our listeners who maybe don't know what interoceptive means.
Okay, so so the first cue is more proprioceptive, which is you are feeling where your body is in space, so you know where your limbs are. So that's getting the students into the shape. Interoceptive means you just go a little bit beneath the skin and the bones to feel what's happening on the inside. And what you could be feeling is all many different things, sensations or energy. So maybe an interoceptive cue would be, how does it feel for you to stretch your arms up higher towards the ceiling or the sky? Something like that. Like maybe a question is a better way to approach interoception, because with interoception, you don't necessarily want to tell the student what they're feeling. You want to maybe make it more of an inquiry-based cue. Yeah, I guess there's lots and lots and lots of ways, and it depends on the pose. And then after that, once you feel that they have settled into that stage, maybe a bit of space, and then maybe you could bring in something more energetic to do with the breath, maybe to do with the mind, or a little bit of philosophy. You know. Yeah, I'd have to think of a concrete example for you.
So, if I'm hearing this right, we cue the movement first, and that's more proprioceptive. That's like step your foot here.
Mm.
And I love how you said in that interoceptive cue, or more of an inquiring, and I love how you said, like, ask this question, and how can we help the student in that pose to feel better in that pose or grow or expand or
Mm.
and that it's led by a question, like we don't have the answers. That's really nice.
I use a lot of questions in teaching. In fact, I probably don't. Could you step your right leg forward? No. I use a lot of questions in teaching because I think it's a great technique to take it away from me. I mean, it's not about me. And this is what I want to tell teachers. It's not, you are there, you are creating a container for this experience, but this experience needs to move through you rather than be directed by you. So, yeah, it's not about you so much. So, try asking questions because it really enables someone to start really feeling about, there's that saying, you use your body to get into the pose, not the pose to get into the body. Is that the right way around?
Yeah, I know what you yeah.
You use the pose to get into your body. That's interoception. Oh gosh, look, what is yoga? I mean, do you want to go there? I mean, you are that
Right.
we need to keep coming back to this, what is yoga? And for me, and this is an important thing that teachers need to answer for themselves, is why are they teaching? And for me, it's about helping people form a more beautiful relationship with themselves. And so if you ask these interoceptive questions, then they're going to start inquiring. And once they start inquiring, then it's going to be like a hall of mirrors. Everything's going to open up for them.
This is great in that you're asking what is our intention of teaching?
Mm.
Because if we go to a class and the teacher's goal is to provide that space where you can ask more questions and get to know yourself more and create space for that, that's a very different class than the teacher who would like to tell you how your body works and how you should move it.
Right.
It's a very different experience.
It's a
Some
yeah, you're
students
right.
will crave that. Some students will ask for, where should I be feeling this? How should I be doing this?
Mm. Yeah. So what do we do with those people? I mean,
Yeah, what do we do then?
I get that a lot in yin. It's like, I'm sure a lot of teachers hear this. Where am I meant to be feeling this? What am I meant to be feeling? And it's like they just have never sat with themselves. Well, this is a generalization too, but if people are asking those questions, to me, what it means is they haven't sat with themselves enough to get to know themselves. It's all new. It's a new experience. They're beginners investigating their body. And so their questions are very valid. And so if a student asks me a question like that, I ask them a question. Well, what are you feeling? Where are you feeling it? And how does that feel? And does it feel okay? Are you okay with that? It's like, yeah. And they're all excited because it's turned the self-discovery back to them, back to the students, which is ultimately we want to get rid of us as teachers, don't we? We just want to be holograms. We don't want to be taking charge of the show. I feel.
I think that's a beautiful space to be as a teacher. And I just want to say I'm like sitting here smiling and laughing because I'm thinking back to classes where people start to get to know me and they'll ask a question. And then as they get to know that I do exactly what you do. I just turn it around and ask them the question. They're like, "Oh, I knew that was coming. Like pretty soon we get to know." And then I think they probably that switch turns on. And I also appreciate that you said these are valid questions. It's not like, I think what happens is when in society are we being asked, we go to school, we sit in our physical education classes and someone's telling you, okay, go run 25 laps. Like no one's asking you, how are you feeling? Like, let's dig into how you're feeling today nobody was asking that when I was in any movement classes as a child.
Well, because people have an agenda that they want to get through this agenda. But I think my interpretation of what's happening in the world at the moment, and it may be incorrect, is that people want to be seen. They want to be seen and they want to be heard, and we're just not. We're starving for attention. And if that came in a yoga class in one special little moment where you said to someone, well, how does that feel? And they go, it feels great. And you go, you're on the right track. That could be enough to propel that person to have the most beautiful day they've ever had. We don't know. We just don't know the power of our words. So if we don't know the power of our words, I want the teachers out there to assume that everything that we say and everything that we do in a yoga class has the propensity to change or to harm or to heal. And if we take that another step further and understand that, then we're going to realize how important our jobs are. Well, everyone's jobs, really. We're all teachers at heart, aren't we, in some way? So, be careful with the words.
Is there anything that you would share around that responsibility? Because that's what it ends up being. It is a big responsibility. And we cannot, I think as humans, I'm a mom to some humans, I'm a partner, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, I'm a podcaster, a yoga teacher, and in all of those spaces, I end up using the wrong words at some point.
Oh, yeah, so do I. Well, all the time. What do you mean? So I'm constantly using the right.
Constantly.
Yeah, it's a struggle.
Right.
It's human. Look, the thing is that we have to create. And what was your question?
Well, it's a responsibility when we are yoga teachers and we know that our words really matter.
Yeah, so that's right. So they do matter. They are important and they have the power to hurt or heal. And I have done both really, in my teaching over the years. I know I've done both. So we have to learn to create a self-awareness of how we are. We have to see and learn and know about how we are in relation to other people. And this is what yoga is about. It's creating relationships. So first and foremost, understand how you relate to people and how that relationship can empower others or can disempower them. And because we are in that position of power, we have to be a little bit more careful, I think. And people are coming to yoga classes for all sorts of reasons. We don't know what they are, but because some of the reasons may be they're seeking healing or help or love or attention, then we do have I'm not sure a responsibility, but we have to take that on board as part of maybe part of what can happen in the yoga classroom, part of the experience. It's not our jobs to heal people as yoga teachers, as much as it's our jobs to fix broken bones or whatever they've come in with.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, as humans, we're walking around saying the wrong thing all the time.
There's a couple of things you can study. Nonviolent communication. That's probably an area that you could study. Trauma-informed language is another area that you can study. You know what? It just comes down to being kind at the end of the day. Really.
I think so too. I think it comes down to being kind. And I've also learned that it also comes down to looking outside of the bubbles you exist in. And maybe this is because I'm a white person with privilege. I feel like when I started looking outside of my bubbles that I was brought up in society, that helped as well. These are good. This is really good looking at trauma training and the nonviolent communication. I like those resources as well. Is there anything else that you wish that you would have known as a newer teacher?
Oh, that's a difficult one for me to answer because I've been a teacher forever. But as a newer yoga teacher, yeah, I wish I'd known that everything was going to be okay. And just to stop worrying so much about, how it is that I appear or the mistakes that I make. Because when we start as new yoga teachers, we're going to make so many mistakes, and you have to make those mistakes. There's no other way. And just know that that's just a period that you're going to transition through, and do it with grace and acceptance, and everything's going to be all right in the end. So I wish I'd known that.
This has been so good. It's been so good to talk with you and hear all of this. How can our connected yoga teachers find your books and work with you further?
So my books, I sell them on Amazon. So they're both there, The Inspired Yoga Teacher and The Language of Yin. And I'm at Gabrielle Harris Yoga on everything, on the other platforms. So yeah, and I'm doing my first Yin training next year. So I'm doing an in-person one. So they may not be able to attend that, but yeah, hopefully one day I'll look at doing something online when I get the guts to actually show my face to the world.
Oh my gosh, I love how you say when you get the guts, when you've written 2 books and been teaching for so long. That just goes to show that we're all the same as humans, that it's sometimes hard to put our work out there no matter what it is.
Absolutely. For everyone. Don't believe what you hear. Yeah.
I also want to give a shout out to Lindsay, who is a really good friend of mine, and I think she helped edited this last book. Is that right?
Yes, Lindsay. So Lindsay's an amazing editor. If you need, we didn't talk about writing yoga books, but just say you're writing a yoga book, go and see Lindsay Hobbs. She's she's the one that you need in your yoga class to edit you. So very smart, but yeah, I'm really pleased. So we should give away some books. I forgot to mention. Should we do that?
That would be amazing. Let's do that. Do you want to do it for people who comment on the show
However
notes?
you want to do it. They just you decide, but I can give away one of each, The Inspired Yoga Teacher and The Language of Yin. And if you just set that up in the comments or however you do it and let me know, and I'll get those books out to them.
That's amazing. If our listeners could comment and share what is one key takeaway from today's episode or one thought that you had as you were listening, and I'll make sure that I say the link when we have the link, that would be amazing. Thank you so much for giving away a couple of books to our listeners.
Oh, look, it's no problem.
Well, thank you again for your time. It's been such a pleasure to get to know you a little bit more beyond your books here. And I just appreciate your time so much and your wisdom.
Oh, thank you, Shannon. And the feeling's reciprocated. Keep doing what you're doing. And to all the yoga teachers out there, keep doing what you're doing as well. Have a beautiful day.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Gabrielle, for all of this information. Also, for giving our connected yoga teachers a chance to win one of your 2 books. So, connected yoga teachers, make sure to comment You can find our comment section over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/281 for today's episode. Once you leave a comment, we'll wait the whole week. And at the end of the week where this episode drops, so it drops on the Monday, and by the Friday, we are going to do a draw for those 2 books. And you can comment on anything. You can comment on what you learned from today's episode. Maybe you want to share a comment about one of the books if you've read one or heard about them, or maybe you have a question that you want to ask, or just a thought that came up while you were listening. As long as you leave a comment there, even if you said, I plan on listening to the podcast episode, I only got to the part where I learned that I can win a free book. Once you leave that comment there, you automatically get entered into the draw to win one of the 2 books. So I look forward to hearing from you over there. As I was re-listening to this interview with Gabrielle, I was really thinking, what are my key takeaways? And one of my key takeaways is this idea that Gabrielle shared around, getting comfortable with silence, even when it's awkward sometimes, and becoming a better listener. And our job is to watch, listen, and observe. And I was thinking in my own personal life, as a podcaster, I love that I get to sit back and listen when I do an interview with someone. And I love that pause. It doesn't feel uncomfortable at all for me. And even teaching yoga, I got really comfortable with silence and pauses and didn't feel like I need to fill the space. But interestingly enough, in my own day-to-day, walking around as a human, sometimes I think that I want to fill the space with conversation. So that's what I'm working on this week. I'm curious, what did you hear this week where you were thinking, that might be something that I add in or think about or observe or try out? I would love to hear what your key takeaway was. I also want to give a shout out of thank you to Victoria, who sent me an email and then gave me permission to read it here for all of you on the podcast. So it was in response to an email I had sent out where I shared a story about my friends being kicked out of a yoga class. And if you want to hear that story, I talk about it more in episode 275. But here is what Victoria said in response to my email. Hi, Shannon. I went to my first yoga class that was not inclusive or accessible for fat bodies. Before the class started, I asked the teacher if she could suggest some modifications to accommodate my fat body. She said, no, I'm not slowing down my class for you. If you can't do a pose, then I suggest you sit out or stay in child's pose. We need to talk about the stereotype around thin white women. I still get the quote unquote stink eye or side glances when I go to studios in my fat body. Also, I'm a yoga teacher. Thanks for talking about this. We all need to talk about it more. In peace, Victoria. Thank you so much, Victoria, for sharing your experience with me and also for allowing me to read it here on the podcast. I feel awful that you had this experience, and I hope that in reading this out, it will help other yoga teachers who are listening so that people don't end up in a class where they have to face this level of body shaming and judgment and, quite frankly, lack of training around making yoga accessible. I think that's really what it boils down to when a teacher says that they cannot offer variations on poses. And I agree, we do need to talk about this more. And we also need to find trainings and classes where yoga is made accessible to everyone, not where we're trying to make people fit something that I don't even think is yoga. The more I learn, it's not about bending yourself into some shape. So thank you so much for opening up this conversation or for letting me share this conversation on the podcast, because we can continue to learn from experiences like this. So thank you so much, Victoria. Connected yoga teachers, if you are wanting to reach out, I love to read reviews of the podcast. You can do that over in iTunes. If you have not done that already, it really is such a gift to our podcast because it helps other people find us when you leave a review. Also, we have a way that you can leave me a voice message. And I love voice messages. That's over on our website. There's a button on the right-hand side. It'll let you leave like 90 seconds of a voice message. Don't get discouraged. If it cuts you off at 90 seconds, just start another one. Go back to our website, click on the button, say this is part 2 of the message. I'll get as many parts as you want to send over. Make sure to tell me like who you are, where you are, and also let me know if we have permission to share it on the podcast, because it's fun to hear from listeners. Everything we talked about today is over in our show notes. That's over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/281. And I want to say a tremendous thank you to Crunch and Sinead who make that happen. So Crunch really does the work of making sure that all of our resources are there and things are written up in a beautiful way. Thank you, Crunch. You do amazing work. And then Sinead steps in and cleans everything up and makes sure that our show notes are all ready for you sometime on Monday. They're there, but there's a few steps to take. If you're really early getting to the podcast, you go over to our show notes page. You'll be able to see. Pay special attention to our website on Monday mornings when the podcast drops, and you can see the work that we still have to do that day. Okay. Also, I want to thank our audio engineer, Suzanne. Thank you so much for putting in the time to really making us all sound better here on the podcast. Now, if you want to get together, Connected Yoga Teachers, right now that's happening online, just with the way the world is and where I am right now. And I'm mostly hanging out, if you want to meet up live, over in Pelvic Health Professionals. And that's where we're learning about all kinds of things to do with the pelvis. And if you're listening in real time, you can join us live today, July 18th. We have a call today with Leslie Howard where we're going to talk about the energetics of the pelvis. There is a replay of this if you are not listening on July the 18th and you've missed this call. Don't worry, we keep all of the previous calls with our guest experts. And so there'll be a replay of this one and another call that we did with Leslie Howard. We've invited her back because she was such a great guest and our pelvic health professionals gained so much from that call. And then we get a guest expert in each and every month. So in August, we're going to talk about desire and libido with Dr. Rose. And then September, we're going to talk about endometriosis and pelvic health with Jill. And we have a lot more coming up for the rest of this year. So come on over and learn with us, connect with other yoga teachers and pelvic health professionals. Oh, and I'm going to be teaching a 6-week series, Yoga for Pelvic Health, and it is going to be included in the membership. You heard it here. It's $120 for everyone else, but for members, it's included. So yeah, join us. It's so much fun over there. We learn a lot, and pretty soon we get to practice together. Okay, because you've listened all the way to the end, I also want to tell you what's coming up next week. We are going to talk with Catherine Ann Flynn next week about what's missing in yoga classes. I love that Catherine has been to lots of yoga classes and been part of a lot of yoga teacher trainings over the years. And she's going to come in and talk about like what key things we're forgetting or kind of taking out of yoga classes and why she thinks they're super important. I learned a lot from this conversation and I cannot wait until you can hear it as well. All right, as we close out today, I would love to ask you, what will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, your yoga practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?